Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the hushed corridors of an imperial palace in old China. The air is thick with incense, the lacquered floors polished to a gleam, and somewhere far off a gong hums like a reminder that power sleeps only lightly here. You're not a grand empress tonight, not even a favored jewel of the court. You're the concubine whose glow has already started to fade. And trust me, in this world of silk screens and hidden daggers, slipping from the emperor's eye is like trying to balance on a greased bamboo pole. You probably wouldn't survive a single week, let alone a season. Your sneakers and iced coffee wouldn't get you very far here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment below with your local time and where you're listening from. I love seeing how far this sleepy caravan travels across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move through the heavy wooden gates of the harem, their bronze studs cold beneath your fingertips. Lanterns flicker along the corridor, each flame trapped like a nervous bird inside its cage. Tonight is supposed to be a night of celebration. The emperor has returned from a hunting trip, his retinue buzzing with stories of swift horses and sharp arrows. Yet you, once chosen to pour wine at his table, now drift at the edges half seen, like a shadow that refuses to catch the torchlight. It wasn't always this way. There was a time when your name was whispered with admiration, when your robes shimmered brighter than the rest, when the other concubines watched you with envy so sharp it could cut silk. But imperial favor is fickle. It can rise like spring blossoms and fall just as quickly, scattering like petals in a sudden storm. You feel the weight of that change each step you take. Your embroidered slippers no longer greeted by smiles but by silence. The palace is a stage, and tonight you're not cast in any role. From a distance you hear laughter, a musical trill that spills from the banquet hall where the emperor dines. Once that laughter would have been yours to share. Now you sit in a side chamber, a plate of food cooling before you. Fish steamed with ginger, fragrant enough to make your stomach ache but untouched. Because no one bothers to refresh your dishes anymore. A small detail, but one that cuts deep. History tells us of these banquets, vast affairs where exotic fruits were piled high, and delicacies like bear's paw or shark fin were laid out for the chosen few. Yet hidden in the records is another truth, that those who fell from favor sometimes starved quietly, their portions reduced, their names forgotten in the scribes' tallies. And scholars still debate whether this was deliberate cruelty or simple neglect, a bureaucracy too tangled to notice one woman fading from view. Either way, you feel it, the gnawing in your belly and the sharper gnawing in your pride. A maidservant hurries past, her eyes avoiding yours. She carries a tray meant for another, the porcelain gleaming, the aroma rich. You almost laugh. Modern workplaces talk about being iced out, but here, being iced out means watching your rivals eat peaches while your rice grows cold. Funny, in a grim sort of way. You lean back against the carved wooden screen, tracing patterns of phoenixes that seem to mock you. Once, the emperor compared you to such a bird, radiant, rare, eternal. Now the only eternity you feel is the length of this lonely evening. Outside, a night breeze rattles the bamboo, the sound like bones clicking in the dark, and still you endure. You smooth the folds of your robe, straighten your hairpin, and pretend for the sake of your dignity that nothing is wrong. Because in this palace, weakness is the one luxury you can't afford. The candles sputter lower, their wax dripping like measured time. Somewhere in the distance, a flute begins to play, haunting, elegant, meant for ears more cherished than yours. You close your eyes, and for a moment you imagine the music belongs to you again. Just for a moment you steal back what was taken, and yet beneath that flicker of memory, you feel the hollow echo of truth. You are no longer the phoenix. You are the shadow it casts. The banquet has ended by now, though you wouldn't know it from the scraps left at your table. The silence afterward is heavier than the music itself, a hush that seeps through corridors and lingers like stale incense. You're still awake, your body restless, your mind tugged by the memory of when your presence mattered. The torches sputter outside, sending shadows crawling across the paper walls. Shadows that seem more alive than you feel tonight. You shuffle down the passageway, the stone cold beneath your thin soles. Every step echoes, reminding you of how hollow the halls have become without attendants trailing behind. Once, girls competed for the honor of carrying your train, straightening your sleeve, whispering flattery to fill the spaces between silences. Now they scurry to others, to fresher faces the way moths abandon a burned-out lamp. If you listen closely, you can hear them giggling in another chamber, their tones sweet, high-pitched, rehearsed. It's like overhearing a party on social media you weren't invited to, except you can't mute the sound. In this section of the palace, the air feels different. The walls carry the scent of old lacquer and faint mildew. Here, the concubines, out of favor, linger like forgotten furniture. You pass a door where another woman once lived. She was banished after falling ill. No one speaks her name anymore, though rumor says her spirit still drifts on moonlit nights. You chuckle softly. Ghost stories at bedtime, how fitting. Except in this palace, the real hauntings are made of gossip, not specters. You pause by a window. Outside, the moon is high, casting its silver light over the roof tiles, each one glistening like dragon scales. You can see the main courtyard, where lanterns still glow warmly for those in the emperor's favor. It feels like staring at another world entirely, one you used to inhabit. The contrast stings, their laughter spilling across open courtyards, your solitude pressed into narrow walls. The empire's chroniclers would never bother with these details. They wrote about victories, ceremonies, rituals. They might note that a favored concubine once danced like the lotus in spring, but they rarely recorded how quickly those petals withered when the emperor's gaze shifted. Historians today argue over whether concubines truly held any power, or whether their influence was simply a borrowed illusion. You feel the irony sharply. Your life, your pain, debated centuries later like a trivia question. A small breeze sneaks through the lattice, brushing against your cheek. You catch the smell of jasmine, faint but stubborn, carried from the emperor's private garden. Once he cut those blossoms for you, a gesture meant to impress. Tonight the petals are probably arranged in someone else's vase. You smile bitterly. Jasmine doesn't care whose table it graces. It simply blooms. If only you could be that indifferent. Back in your chamber, the furnishings look duller than they once did. A silk cushion with threads unraveling, a mirror speckled with age. You settle onto the couch, running your hand along the carved wood armrest. Its smoothness is a reminder of how many hands leaned here before yours. This palace is a machine, churning through generations of women, polishing and discarding them with the same indifference. You're part of that cycle now, replaced, obsolete, like an app that no longer updates. Still, you resist. There's a stubborn ember inside you that refuses to extinguish. You reach for a scroll of poetry, your fingers tracing the faded ink. Words at least remain loyal. They don't forget you when a younger beauty arrives. You whisper the lines aloud, letting the rhythm soothe your frayed nerves. Your voice fills the chamber softly, a reminder that you still exist even if history tries to erase you. The night deepens. Somewhere in the distance, the palace drums mark the hour. Their thud is steady, inevitable, like time itself reminding you that it marches on without caring who is favored or forgotten. You sigh, leaning your head back, staring at the ceiling beams. Each crack in the wood feels like a story, and you wonder how many other women once lay here staring upward, thinking the same thoughts. The irony, of course, is that the palace never stops pretending. Tomorrow there will be processions, rituals, silk garments dazzling under the sun. The empire thrives on appearances. What's hidden in the dark is never part of the script. But you, sitting here in the forgotten wing, are the counterpoint, the silent margin note no scholar will ever read. And in that quiet, you let out a small laugh, because really, who needs reality TV when you've got palace drama like this? At least reality TV gives you confessionals. Here the walls are your only audience, and they never clap. The night grows colder, the oil in your lamp burning low. You curl under your quilt, thin and scratchy, and pull it close. Somewhere in the silence you realize, it isn't just the emperor who's forgotten you. It's the entire machinery of the court. And yet, as you close your eyes, your breath steadying, you cling to a secret thought, that even shadows can linger long after the lanterns go dark. The palace wakes before dawn, but you find yourself already awake, lying in that hazy blur between night and morning. The ceiling beams above look darker, the faint flicker of your dying lamp throwing long, spidery shapes across the room. You shift under the quilt, listening. There it is, the shuffle of feet, the clink of trays, the murmur of servants preparing for the emperor's breakfast. None of it is for you. Once, those sounds meant anticipation. Your hair being styled, your robes laid out, the possibility of being summoned. Now they're just background noise, like an alarm that rings for someone else's morning. You rise anyway. Habit is stubborn, even when purpose has gone. The floor is cold, biting through the soles of your slippers. You smooth your robe, run a comb through your hair and catch your reflection in the spotted mirror. There you are, still young by any ordinary measure, but here, age is calculated in the Emperor's glances. And when those glances skip over you, time runs faster. You lean closer to the glass, trying to find the shimmer you once had. All you see is the faint shadow of doubt. The other concubines begin their day in chorus, a tangle of voices carried down the corridor. Laughter, squeals, the flutter of silk. You remember being part of that chorus, matching their tones like a well-rehearsed song. Now when you step out, conversations fall quiet, like a harp string snapped mid-note. No one dares insult you directly, but silence here is sharper than any word. It's a little like walking into an office lunch, where your co-workers suddenly remember they already ordered. Awkward, bruising, and very clear. A young servant girl rushes past, nearly tripping in her haste. She's carrying a porcelain bowl of steaming congee, the scent of ginger rising into the chill morning air. Not for you, of course. The bowl tilts slightly, and a few drops splash onto the polished floor, glistening like tiny jewels. She doesn't even apologize. Her eyes are fixed ahead towards someone who still matters. You watch her vanish around the corner, and for a moment you feel transparent, as if you've become one of the paper lanterns, delicate, pretty, but hollow inside. There's an official record from the Tang dynasty that describes the morning rituals of the harem. It speaks of precise ranks, of who could wear which color, of how breakfast was delivered according to favor. But the odd detail, rarely mentioned, is how quickly those privileges could vanish. One day you're dining on lotus seed pastries, the next you're lucky if you get plain rice. Historians still argue about whether this system was designed to maintain discipline or simply to remind everyone of their fragility. Either way it works. You feel that fragility pressing on your chest with each skipped meal. You wander toward the garden courtyard, where plum blossoms are beginning to open. Their fragrance hangs in the air, a soft defiance against the cold. Once these blossoms were offered to you, arranged in vases to brighten your chambers. Today you stand beneath the branches, the petals falling into your hair like pity. You brush them away. Though secretly you like the way they cling. For a fleeting second you imagine the Emperor catching sight of you again, lit by early sunlight and framed by blossoms. But the fantasy breaks quickly. The rustle you hear is not him, only another concubine passing by with her entourage. She doesn't glance your way. You chuckle under your breath. Falling out of favor sounds almost polite, doesn't it? As though you simply slipped from a chair. In reality, it feels more like being dropped into a pit you can't climb out of. And while modern heartbreak comes with breakup songs and maybe ice cream here, you get stricter rationing and colder stares. Not nearly as comforting. Back in your chamber, you find a letter you once wrote, folded neatly but never sent. It was meant for the Emperor. Lines of poetry comparing his gaze to the sun, his voice to flowing water. You smile wryly now. The ink has faded, and so has its purpose. You wonder whether any of your words ever mattered, or if they were just pebbles tossed into an endless river. The morning bells toll, announcing another day of ceremonies. You won't be attending. Your name wasn't called when the roster was read. Still, you prepare yourself as though you might. A small act of rebellion, to hold on to the rituals even when the court has decided you're unnecessary. You tie your sash carefully, pin your hair with precision and stand tall. If you must be invisible, you'll at least be invisible with dignity. The sun climbs higher, painting the tiled roofs gold. From your window, you catch sight of the Emperor's retinue moving across the courtyard, bright as a parade. The Emperor himself is hidden among them, his robes a blaze of yellow. For one heart-stopping moment, you imagine his gaze flicking upward, catching yours, lingering. But of course it doesn't. He walks on, surrounded by attendants, laughter floating in his wake. You let out a slow breath. The day stretches ahead, empty but heavy. And in that emptiness, you feel the irony. You are surrounded by thousands of people, yet you've never been lonelier. By the time the sun sits high, the palace has transformed into a hive of ceremony. The clang of gongs, the shuffle of embroidered slippers, the fluttering banners that snap like sails in the breeze. Every sound reminds you of a stage you no longer stand upon. You linger at the edge of your chamber, listening, not daring to join. The summons never came, and without it, Stepping into that hall would be a trespass. You're left with silence and the thin comfort of shadows. Lunch arrives, or rather what passes for lunch. A small bowl of rice, lukewarm, and a slice of pickled radish that tastes more of salt than anything else. Once your meals glittered with rare delicacies. Bird's nest soup, lychees carried in from the south, sweetmeats drizzled with honey. Now the tray looks more like a punishment than a meal. You smile faintly. It's not starvation, but it's not indulgence either. Just enough to keep you existing. Not enough to keep you glowing. Historians still debate whether the emperor personally ordered such reductions, or if the palace bureaucracy simply adjusted itself like clockwork, removing luxuries the moment favor dimmed. Either way, you're the one chewing bland radish while others feast. From your chamber window, you can just glimpse the banquet unfolding in the courtyard. Dancers whirl, their silk sleeves like waves crashing in rhythm. Drums pound sharp and insistent. Once you too danced there, your feet tracing patterns meant to captivate. You remember the emperor's smile, faint but unmistakable, as he leaned forward in his seat. That memory warms you and wounds you at the same time, like a scar that still tingles in the rain. A maidservant enters quietly, setting down your tray with a bow that feels more obligatory than sincere. Her eyes flick toward the window, toward the celebration outside, and you catch the glimmer of longing there. She too is trapped by rank, though her prison is different. For a moment you almost laugh. Two invisible women sharing a room, pretending not to notice each other's silence. You reach for your chin, the zither that once filled your chambers with melody. Its strings are dusty now, slightly slack. You pluck one and the note wavers, fragile as a moth's wing. The sound carries, soft but insistent, reminding you of when the emperor lingered at your side to listen. That night, he called your music the voice of heaven. Tonight, the same strings sound like the voice of emptiness. Still, you play, not for him anymore, but for yourself. The melody drifts out the window, threading itself into the noise of celebration. No one pauses to listen. The drums drown it out, the laughter smothers it. And yet there's a strange peace in this defiance. Your music existing, even if unacknowledged. It's a little like writing a diary no one will ever read, but writing anyway, because the act itself insists you're still alive. As you play, a memory surfaces, one of those small odd details the official histories never bother with. You remember the emperor once teasing you about your crooked handwriting, how he laughed and compared it to a drunken goose stumbling across sand. You had laughed too, though you spent hours afterward practicing, desperate to please, and now? That laughter echoes in your mind. Not cruel, not kind, just gone. The sun slides lower, casting long bars of light across your floor. Dust motes dance in the beams, tiny sparks that feel almost celebratory in their own right. You smile at them, because sometimes dust is the only confetti you get. In the corridor, footsteps approach. You stiffen, half hoping, half fearing. But it's only another servant, carrying robes dyed in rich vermilion, robes that will never drape your shoulders again. She passes without a glance, and the scent of fresh silk lingers behind her, sweet and mocking. You sigh, setting aside the zither. The celebration continues outside, but inside your chamber the day feels endless, stretched thin by emptiness. You curl your fingers into your palm, pressing until your nails leave crescents in your skin, a small reminder. You can still feel something even if the world insists you're fading, and in that moment you realize the palace has its own rhythm, one that never slows for grief. You can either let it drown you, or find a way to hum along quietly, stubbornly, like the single note of a zither string beneath the roar of drums. The sun begins to sink, painting the palace walls in amber and crimson. Shadows stretch long across the courtyard, swallowing the laughter and music that still echo faintly from the banquet hall. You sit near the edge of your chamber, robe folded neatly around you, and trace the fraying hem with your fingertips. Once your garments were newly embroidered each season, jeweled threads gleaming in torchlight. Now this robe bears loose stitches, a sleeve slightly faded, small betrayals of your diminishing place. You lift the fabric closer to your face, running a nail over the uneven thread. It's funny in a cruel way. Once a single crooked stitch would have had a seamstress punished, yet here you are wearing an entire sleeve of imperfection. You almost want to laugh, but the sound would echo too loudly in your empty room. Outside, cicadas begin their chorus, shrill and endless. Their voices rise like a wall of sound, reminding you of summers past, when the emperor's attention was still yours. He once compared your laugh to the song of cicadas, sharp, persistent, impossible to ignore. Now the insects continue without you, their music swelling as if to mock your silence. You recall how garments once marked your status, purple for those closest to the throne, lighter shades for those lingering further away. Your robe's dye has dulled so much, it almost blends with the servants. Historians love to write about the symbolism of these colors, debating whether fabric alone could elevate a concubine or crush her. But you living it know the truth. Fabric doesn't just symbolize power, it enforces it. Tonight, your frayed hem is proof enough. You smooth the robe anyway, pretending the threads are still flawless. Pretending has become its own form of armor. And as you sit there, a thought creeps in. Maybe this robe is you, once radiant, now unraveling, but still holding together somehow. From the hall comes the faint shuffle of footsteps. A pair of concubines glide past, their robes shimmering with fresh embroidery, phoenixes leaping across the fabric. You watch through the lattice window, their laughter pitched just high enough for you to hear. They don't speak your name, but the glance they toss toward your door says enough. They know what you've lost, and they revel in it the way children revel in a secret. You draw back into your room, clutching the sleeve tighter. The irony is sharp. These same women once bowed to you, their tones sugar-sweet when they begged for advice. Now their politeness has cooled into pity, or worse, amusement. Your hand drifts to a small lacquered box tucked into the corner of your chest. Inside lies an old hairpin, gilded and delicate, a gift from the Emperor in your brighter days. You lift it gently, its weight surprisingly heavy in your palm. The pin still gleams, catching the dying sunlight, though a small pearl at the tip has loosened. You tuck it into your hair just to see if it still suits you. It does, and yet no one will notice. The cicadas sing louder. The garden's lanterns begin to glow, their flames bending in the evening breeze. You wonder if the Emperor even remembers giving you this hairpin, or if it is already blurred into the endless haze of his favors, scattered across too many faces. Scholars centuries from now will argue about concubines' influence, about whether their beauty truly mattered, or if politics always outweighed affection. But here, with a loose pearl in your hair and a fraying robe around your shoulders, you already know the answer. Beauty buys you time, but politics takes the bill. You set the pin aside carefully, almost reverently, as though you're laying flowers on a grave. The robe slips from your shoulder, its weight lighter than you remember. You draw the fabric close again, holding it not for warmth but for memory. A laugh bubbles up, not joyous but sardonic. If anyone asked you what Imperial life was like, you'd tell them, it's like wearing silk that's always about to tear. Soft, dangerous, and never really yours. The cicadas sing on. The lanterns flicker brighter, and you sit there, robe gathered around you, a ghost still clothed in silk. Night presses in fully now, the courtyard swallowed by darkness broken only by lantern glow. You sit alone at the edge of your bed, staring at the empty space where the Emperor once would have lain. The quilt is folded neatly, untouched, as if waiting for someone who will never arrive. You shift, smoothing the fabric anyway, the way a host might straighten a chair for a guest who has long since declined the invitation. The silence is sharp, filled with nothing but the faint chirp of crickets beyond the walls. It is not that you expected him tonight. Expectation died weeks ago. But habit lingers cruelly. You still tilt your ear when footsteps echo down the corridor, still hold your breath when the latch rattles, only to exhale disappointment when the sound fades past your door. The emptiness beside you feels louder than the cicadas, heavier than the quilt. Once these nights were different. You remember the glow of candles, the fragrance of sandalwood, the warmth of his hand brushing yours. Conversations whispered until dawn, laughter muffled in the folds of silk. Those nights carved themselves into your memory like etchings on jade, sharp, luminous, impossible to forget. And yet jade can crack, and so too have those memories. A single moth circles the lamp near your bed, its wings frantic in the glow. You watch it beat against the glass, desperate for warmth that only burns. You smile wryly. You understand its struggle all too well, chasing light, only to be singed when it fades. The historians' accounts rarely speak of this silence. They catalogue rituals, births, deaths, the movements of armies. They note which concubine bore heirs, which was promoted, which was cast aside. But they don't mention the stillness of an untouched bed, or the hollow ache of waiting for footsteps that never come. Scholars debate whether concubines lived lives of luxury or torment, but the truth lies somewhere in between. Luxury in things, torment in absence. You lie down, staring at the canopy above. Patterns of phoenixes and dragons twist in the embroidered cloth, symbols of harmony. You almost laugh. What harmony? The emperor sleeps elsewhere, his laughter spilling into another chamber. Here, the only harmony is between you and silence. Two old companions sharing the night. A breeze slips through the shutters, carrying the faint scent of plum blossoms. It should be comforting, but instead it feels mocking. Plum blossoms are admired in every season, while you bloom only until the emperor looks away. You tug the quilt higher, cocooning yourself against the draft. The fabric smells faintly of camphor, sharp and medicinal. Nothing like the sweet perfumes you once wore. You think of the other concubines tonight, those who bask in his attention. They will be draped in new silk, their laughter filling the chamber, their confidence rising like the heat from the lamps. And you? You lie awake, counting the cracks in the ceiling, tracing loneliness into patterns only you can see. A small sound escapes your throat, half chuckle, half sigh. Sleeping alone sounds so ordinary in modern times. People even brag about it, like it's a luxury. But here in the palace, it's a sentence. No streaming shows, no playlists to keep you company. Just silence, shadows, and your own restless thoughts. You turn on your side, pressing your cheek against the pillow. The fabric is cool, almost damp from the night air. You close your eyes, but sleep resists. Images crowd your mind. The emperor's smile, the shimmer of other women's robes, the hollow space beside you. The more you chase rest, the more it eludes you. And then you whisper to yourself, not words of comfort, but a reminder. Endure. Because that is what palace life demands. To endure the silence, the emptiness, the waiting. To endure until dawn comes, and with it another day of fading. The moth finally settles, wings still against the lamp glass. You envy it. At least it found a place to rest. The morning comes with no fanfare, only the steady rhythm of servants' feet and the rustle of silk screens being pulled aside. You sit up slowly, the quilt sliding from your shoulders, and listen to the murmur of voices just beyond your chamber. Once those voices would have spoken your name with deference, eager to carry your words forward. Now they speak of others, new favorites, new alliances. It's like tuning into a radio, only to find the station you loved has been replaced with static and someone else's song. You reach for your writing brush. Its bristles are stiff, neglected. On the small desk lies paper, smooth pale, waiting. You dip the brush into ink, the black liquid glistening like obsidian. Your hand trembles slightly as you begin a line of poetry, characters curling like vines across the page. These words were once gifts, offerings of wit and beauty, sent to the emperor with the hope of stirring his interest. He used to answer with comments, playful or flattering. But now, nothing. Your verses vanish into silence, as though dropped into a well too deep to hear the splash. One sheet of paper bears faint smudges where tears fell days ago. You smooth it gently, pretending the ink blots are intentional strokes. It's a trick, really. If you call it art, perhaps it won't feel like despair. You write again today, a verse about the morning mist curling around the palace eaves. The characters are graceful enough, but they feel like smoke in your mouth, weightless, dissolving. A servant enters briefly, bowing as she sets down a message from the outer offices. You seize it with a flicker of hope, your pulse quickening. But the seal bears not the emperor's mark, only the dull emblem of the scribe's quarter. It is a notice, plain and impersonal, announcing upcoming ceremonies. Your name is absent, not even listed among those attending in the lowest ranks. You press your lips together, biting back laughter that feels closer to a sob. The irony is sharp. You are surrounded by ink, paper scrolls, symbols of memory and permanence. Yet your own existence fades from the record. Historians centuries later will argue over these omissions, debating whether concubines lost from the scrolls were erased deliberately or simply forgotten. You know which it feels like? Forgotten is colder. Erased at least implies intention. You lay the brush aside and glance at the shelves. Once your scrolls were displayed prominently, admired for their elegance. Now dust creeps along their edges, the calligraphy dulled by neglect. You imagine spiders spinning webs in the corners, weaving their own kind of script. One no scholar will ever dispute. The act of writing once made you feel powerful, Like your words could bend the Emperor's heart, even if just for an evening. Now the brush feels heavy, the paper accusing. You whisper a line aloud, testing its sound in the quiet chamber. The words hang there, brittle, before dissolving into nothing. The silence after is more eloquent than the poem itself. You chuckle, low and dry. In another life, maybe you'd be a writer whose audience actually responded. But here your only readers are the walls, and they're notoriously bad at feedback. Setting the paper aside, you lean back and close your eyes. You can almost see the Emperor's face from that first night you sent him a poem, the way his eyes lit, amused, curious. That memory lingers like perfume, faint but stubborn. You hold it close, even as you know it's as fragile as the ink drying on today's page. Outside, bells toll again, summoning the favored to their duties. You remain in your chamber, surrounded by words no one will read. A single sheet of poetry curls in the draft, its corner lifting as though it too wants to escape. You let it flutter to the floor. In the end, the brush falls silent, and so do you. The corridors are alive with whispers long before you step into them. It isn't just the shuffle of silk slippers or the creak of wooden doors. It's the low hum of gossip, a constant undercurrent in this palace that never sleeps. You move carefully, each footstep soft, but your ears catch fragments anyway. Words half hidden behind fans, laughter clipped short when you approach. You don't need to hear the full sentences. You already know their subject. Your name floats through the air like smoke, visible for a moment, then gone. They speak of your decline as if it were theatre, a performance to be critiqued. Once these same voices cooed your praises, envied your place at the Emperor's side. Now their tones sharpen, amused and cruel. You'd think losing favor was some kind of scandal, though it happens to nearly everyone eventually. It's like office gossip centuries ahead of schedule. Your co-workers huddled by the water cooler, except the water cooler is a lotus pond, and the stakes are life, not promotion. You pass a group of younger concubines clustered near the colonnade. Their laughter rises when they see you, though they lower their eyes with practiced innocence. One of them drops a handkerchief embroidered with tiny cranes, and another snickers, whispering a word you can't quite catch. The gesture is clear enough. They see you as fragile, faded, a cautionary tale in silk. You don't flinch. Instead, you straighten your back, letting your steps fall with measured grace. If they want a ghost, you'll give them a regal one. The irony, of course, is that gossip holds more power here than edicts. Scholars centuries later will argue about political factions in the harem, about whether alliances or beauty dictated survival. But the truth whispers around you. Gossip is its own weapon. The single rumor can close doors faster than any imperial decree. You recall once hearing of a concubine from a dynasty past, a woman so clever she fed the servants false stories just to see how quickly they spread. By the next morning, her fiction was gospel. You chuckle softly at the thought, perhaps you should try it. But then again, what would you gain? Rumors now are less about power, more about amusement. And you, unwillingly, are their favorite entertainment. A servant girl brushes past, balancing a tray of teacups. She glances at you, then quickly away. You catch her whisper to another. She used to be the one. The words sting even though they're true. Used to be, past tense. The palace devours women not just in the flesh, but in memory. You find yourself at the edge of the lotus pond, its waters still and reflective. Dragonflies skim the surface, their wings flashing in the sun. For a moment you lean over, studying your reflection. The water shows you a face still young, still delicate, but marked by something deeper. Exhaustion, perhaps, or the faint crease of bitterness. You splash the surface with your hand, breaking the image into ripples. Gossip may twist your story, but at least the water is honest. You sit on the stone bench nearby, listening as the laughter of others drifts closer, then fades again. You let it pass through you like wind through reeds. A thought occurs to you. Maybe this is what survival in the palace truly means. Not silencing gossip, but outlasting it. History will forget the snickers, but maybe, just maybe, it will remember that you endured. Still, you can't resist one dry laugh. If you could leave a review for this palace, you'd probably rate it 2 stars. Great architecture, terrible customer service. The pond glimmers, calm and unbothered. You envy it. The zither sits in the corner, its lacquered surface catching stray beams of light. You haven't touched it since the other night, when its voice trembled beneath your fingers like something half broken. Tonight, though, you feel drawn to it, Not for joy, not for an audience, but for company. An unused instrument, after all, is still a better companion than whispers in the hall. You kneel before it, brushing dust from the strings with your sleeve. The fine layer of neglect comes away easily, but it leaves a bitter truth. You have been forgotten, and so has this instrument. Once your music filled the emperor's chambers, gentle and sweet. He would close his eyes, as if the sound itself wrapped around him like silk. Now the only ears left to hear are the wooden walls and the moths circling the lamplight. Your fingers pluck a note. It quivers, slightly off-pitch, a reminder of time's wear. You adjust, tuning slowly, until the strings sing again. The melody that emerges is soft, almost mournful, weaving through the quiet chamber. It isn't a grand song, it's a whisper, a confession. You play not for love, not for favor, but to remind yourself you're still capable of creating beauty, even in solitude. There's a strange comfort in the sound. It fills the emptiness, pushes back against the silence that usually presses too close. You close your eyes, letting the music guide your breath, steady and slow. For a moment it feels like prayer, though not to gods or emperors, just to yourself. History remembers famous instruments, tales of emperors enchanted by music, poems inspired by melodies. Yet what no chronicle tells is how often those same instruments went silent, how quickly songs turned to dust when their players were discarded. Scholars still argue whether concubines like you composed their own songs or merely repeated traditional tunes. You smile faintly at the thought. Let them argue. Tonight the notes are yours and no historian can take them. The song drifts into the courtyard, faint but lingering. A guard stationed nearby tilts his head, listening. For a moment you wonder if he recognizes the tune. Probably not. To him it's just background noise, like wind in bamboo. Still, the fact that someone, even a stranger, hears your music brings a flicker of warmth. You shift into a lighter melody, playful, almost mocking. A small rebellion, to laugh through strings when your voice cannot. You imagine the emperor hearing it from afar, pausing, remembering. But no footsteps come, no summons arrives. The music dies on the strings, like laughter caught in a closed mouth. You stop letting the final note linger until it fades completely. The silence that follows feels heavier than before, pressing against your chest. You lean forward, resting your forehead on the zither, the wood cool against your skin. For a moment, you let yourself imagine the instrument whispering back, telling you it remembers when your chamber was full, when the emperor listened. But wood doesn't speak. Strings don't comfort. Only you remain and the echo of your own song. You laugh softly. Well, at least I'm my own audience. The joke hangs in the air, brittle but true. The zither gleams faintly, patient in the corner. You rise, leaving it behind once more. Perhaps tomorrow you'll play again. Or perhaps it will sit silent for weeks, a relic of a time when your voice mattered. Either way, its quiet presence reminds you, beauty endures, even when uncelebrated. And as you return to your bed, you realize that in this palace of constant eyes and endless noise, the sweetest rebellion may be to create something no one else applauds. The morning begins with drums rolling across the courtyards, deep and commanding, their rhythm announcing the day's grand ceremony. You hear them from your chamber, a distant thunder you once moved toward with anticipation. Today the sound is more like a wall shutting you out. No summons has arrived. No servant has knocked on your door. Your name isn't on the list. Again. You sit at the threshold, peering through the lattice, watching as the procession takes shape. Robes blaze with color, scarlet, gold, jade, all flowing like rivers of fire and sunlight. The concubines line up according to rank, their hairpins catching the light so fiercely it almost blinds you. You remember standing among them once, your place close to the emperor's side. Now you sit in the shadows, reduced to spectator. The ceremony begins with chants low and resonant, filling the air like waves crashing against stone. Incense curls skyward in thick plumes, its fragrance reaching even your secluded corner. Once attendants would have offered you your own gilded censer, the smoke coiling in your chamber like a private cloud. Now you smell only the leftovers of devotion, a second-hand sanctity drifting past. A young concubine stumbles slightly in her bow, drawing a ripple of laughter from those behind her. You catch yourself smirking. The cruelty of the harem never misses a chance. It almost comforts you to know that no matter who holds the spotlight, mistakes are always magnified. Even if you're forgotten, at least you're no longer the one under constant scrutiny. Small mercies. Historians write about these ceremonies with reverence, the solemnity, the symbolism, the perfection of ritual. What they rarely note is how these events were also performances of exclusion. To be absent from the procession was not a simple oversight, it was a statement. Scholars still argue whether the emperor himself dictated such absences or if courtiers engineered them. You suspect the truth is both, tangled together like roots beneath the palace floor. As the drums continue, you notice your own reflection in the polished wood of the screen. You look oddly regal there, framed by shadow, almost as if you belong to the ceremony, though in reality you're invisible. The reflection mocks you gently. Queen of nothing, sovereign of silence, the music swells. Flutes rise sharp and bright, cutting through the chants. You remember the weight of standing still in heavy robes, the ache in your knees as the rituals stretched on. Oddly enough, you almost miss it. Absence is heavier than discomfort. Loneliness aches deeper than stiff joints. A servant passes by your chamber, her arms laden with offerings bound for the altar. She hesitates, glancing at you with quick pity, then hurries on. You can't decide which is worse, being mocked or being pitied. At least mockery acknowledges your presence. Pity reduces you to something fragile, a vase already cracked. The ceremony drags on, the sun climbing higher, sweat gleaming on foreheads, jewels flashing brighter. You stay where you are, watching, not invited but unable to look away. Each chant feels like a nail sealing a door between you and the life you once held. Finally, the drums cease. The procession dissolves like mist, the colors retreating, the voices scattering. The courtyard empties, leaving behind only faint trails of incense and the echo of footsteps. You exhale slowly, realizing you've been holding your breath as if waiting for someone to notice you. No one did. You step back into your chamber, the silence closing in once more. The ceremony is over and you were never part of it. You laugh dryly. Well, at least I didn't have to kneel in the sun. A small victory, but in this palace, sometimes survival is measured in ironies. The incense lingers, sweet and suffocating. You wave it away, retreating deeper into your solitude. The incense burns differently now. Once your chamber carried its own fragrance, carefully chosen blends of agar wood, musk, and rare herbs, imported from distant provinces. Servants lit them daily, the smoke curling like a signature that marked your presence. Now the censer sits cold in the corner, its bronze lid collecting dust. The last stick you were given burned out weeks ago, and no one has replenished the supply. You catch the faint trace of sandalwood drifting from the corridor, carried from another room. It's rich, warm, the kind of scent that clings to silk and lingers in hair. You close your eyes and inhale, but the sweetness fades quickly, leaving only the stale air of your chamber. Once this smell belonged to you. Now it floats past, claimed by someone else. You open your lacquered box of perfumes, a collection that once made you feel like spring embodied. The bottles are half empty, the liquids inside darkening with age. You dab a little onto your wrist, more out of stubbornness than vanity. The fragrance rises faintly, jasmine, delicate and light. You hold your wrist close, breathing it in as if trying to remind yourself you are still here. Still more than shadow. But scents fade fast. Within moments, the perfume thins, leaving only a whisper. You wonder if that's what's happening to you, lingering faintly, destined to evaporate into nothing. Historians describe incense in palaces as symbols of refinement, purity, divine order. What they rarely mention is how it also marked hierarchy. Only the favored were allowed certain blends. Only the chosen could fill their chambers with the richer smoke. Scholars still debate whether this was a matter of ritual or control. You know firsthand it's both. You rise and step into the corridor. So a maidservant carrying fresh incense sticks hurries past, her bundle wrapped in red silk. The scent hits you like a wave, and you find yourself pausing mid-step. She lowers her gaze quickly, bowing, but you catch the flash of discomfort in her eyes. Even servants know which chambers matter and which don't. She doesn't linger near yours. Back inside, the silence smells of dust. You laugh softly to yourself. In a modern world, people buy scented candles to relax, choosing vanilla latte or ocean breeze. Here, the absence of fragrance is the real punishment. Your chamber smells like nothing, and that nothing is louder than perfume. You wander to your bed, pulling the quilt over your knees. You remember the emperor once noticing the scent on your hair, leaning close to breathe it in. He had called you a blossom in winter. Now winter is all that's left. You tuck the memory away, sharp and sweet, like the last drop in an empty vial. The censer sits in the corner, silent. You imagine lighting it anyway, filling the room with smoke until the walls themselves remember you. But there are no sticks left, only cold metal waiting. You chuckle dryly. Queen of Ashes, ruler of dust. Not quite the title you dreamed of, but it fits. The chamber is quiet, the air plain. And in that plainness you realize the cruelest truth. It isn't always hatred or punishment that erases you. Sometimes it's simply being forgotten, like fragrance fading until only the memory remains. The mirror waits in the corner, its bronze surface dulled with age. You've avoided it lately. Knowing what it shows is never what you want to see. But tonight, some stubborn impulse draws you near. You kneel before it, leaning close until your breath fogs the metal. At first, all you see is blur. Then, slowly, your features take shape. Eyes that seem heavier than you remember. Lips pressed thin, a faint crease at the corner of your brow. You tilt your head, adjusting the angle as though the mirror might suddenly reveal the girl the Emperor once adored. It doesn't. It reflects only the woman left behind. You reach up, smoothing your hair with careful fingers. A strand falls loose, refusing to stay pinned. Once, attendants would have rushed forward, fixing it instantly, murmuring praise as though every hair mattered. Now you fumble with the pin yourself, the gesture clumsy, a little desperate. The mirror shows you everything. The effort, the futility, the small lie of pretending. Bronze mirrors in ancient China were said to reveal not just the face, but the soul. Scholars wrote poems about them, comparing reflections to moonlight on water. Some even believed such mirrors could expose demons hiding in human form. You smile faintly at the thought. If that's true, then perhaps the demon tonight is your own doubt. You lean closer, tracing the outline of your cheek. The skin is still smooth, still fair, but you can't help imagining cracks as though your reflection is porcelain about to fracture. You whisper, still beautiful, just to hear the words. The mirror doesn't argue, but it doesn't agree either. Behind you, the chamber flickers with lamplight. The glow strikes the mirror, scattering faint halos around your face. For a moment, it almost feels as if you're adorned again, like old times when jewels caught the firelight. Almost. But the illusion breaks quickly, leaving only dim bronze and tired eyes. Historians like to say concubines competed through beauty, as though that were the whole story. They debate whether cosmetics, gowns, and hair ornaments truly swayed emperors, or whether politics decided everything. You know the truth is crueler. Beauty matters until it doesn't. The mirror doesn't lie about that. You laugh softly, shaking your head. In the modern world, you imagine people staring into bathroom mirrors, worrying over wrinkles and hair dye. At least they can step outside and buy a new shade of lipstick. Here in the palace, your reflection is your only currency. And when that coin loses its shine, there's no bank willing to exchange it. You sit back, letting the mirror catch your whole form. The robe with its frayed hem, the hairpin with its loosened pearl, the faint hollowness in your shoulders. It is you, unvarnished, unavoidable. The Emperor won't see this image. He has no reason to. But you will every night until you stop looking altogether. You lift the mirror slightly, angling it so it shows only the ceiling beams above. Better that than your own face. You laugh dryly. At least the beams haven't aged. Setting the mirror down, you turn away. But the reflection lingers in your mind, sharper than any image you've seen. It tells a truth you already knew. You are fading, and the palace will not pause to notice. The lamp sputters beside you, casting one last shimmer across the mirror's surface. In it, your face blurs again, dissolving into shadow. You decide at last to try again. Pride may have slipped, but hope is more stubborn than you'd like to admit. With brush and ink, you write a short plea on delicate paper. Careful, graceful characters, every stroke rehearsed. Not a poem this time, but a simple message, polite and restrained, asking for an audience, for a word, for anything at all. You fold the note neatly and summon a eunuch. He bows, his face expressionless, hands tucked within long sleeves. You extend the letter, watching his eyes flicker briefly toward it, then toward you. He takes it, but his movements are slow, almost reluctant, as if the paper burns. I will see what can be done, he murmurs, the words flat, practiced. You know what they mean, probably nothing. Still, you wait. Hours stretch into evening, the oil in your lamp sinking lower as the light fades. Each knock on a distant door makes you sit up, pulse quickening. But no one returns. Your note has vanished into the palace's labyrinth of corridors, swallowed like so many before it. You remember when a single poem of yours could earn an immediate summons. How the emperor once praised your wit, sending silk as a reward for a clever turn of phrase. Now the silence is louder than any rejection. Her refusal would at least acknowledge your existence. This absence feels like erasure. The maidservant sets down a tray of food, rice gone cold, a slice of fish curling at the edges. You don't touch it. Instead, you watch the flame of the lamp tremble in the draught. You think of your note, maybe lying unopened on some desk or tossed into the brazier by a disinterested hand. The image stings worse than mockery. Historians sometimes mention petitions from concubines, dry lines in official records about women who sought audience and were denied. Scholars still debate whether such requests were truly ignored or merely misplaced in the bureaucracy. But here you know the truth. Silence can be deliberate. Silence is its own weapon. You press your hand to your chest, feeling your heartbeat steady but heavy. The emperor is somewhere nearby within these very walls, perhaps laughing at another concubine's jest or marveling at her embroidery. You are close enough to hear echoes, yet far enough to be invisible. The eunuch never returns. The night deepens. The note is gone, a dry chuckle escapes you. At least rejection letters exist in the modern world. Here they just ghost you. The word feels oddly fitting, though centuries too early. You gather the untouched tray, pushing it aside. The hunger in your belly matches the hunger in your heart, sharp and unrelenting. But you lie down anyway, staring at the canopy above, whispering to yourself, "Endure." And in the silence you imagine the paper curling in flames somewhere, your words turning to smoke that no one breathes. The tray arrives later than usual the next morning, carried by a servant who doesn't quite meet your eyes. When she sets it down, you notice immediately how different it looks. Once it held bowls of steaming broth, fresh lotus seeds and fruit that glistened like jewels. Today there is only a single plate of rice and a few slices of pear. The fruit's skin is wrinkled, its flesh already browning at the edges. You pick up a slice, turning it in your fingers. The pear is soft, mealy, nothing like the crisp sweetness you remember. You take a bite anyway, and the taste is sour, almost bitter. You chew slowly, as if the act itself might restore dignity. It doesn't. The pear collapses on your tongue like disappointment made edible. The palace records speak often of banquets, how the emperor's table overflowed with delicacies from across the empire. Lychees carried on horseback, salted fish from the coast, persimmons preserved in honey. But the records never say what happened to those who fell from grace, who were quietly served bruised fruit and day-old rice. Scholars debate whether such small degradations were intentional or the result of careless servants. You know better. In the palace, nothing is careless. Even a pear can be a message. You set the plate aside, appetite gone. The air in the chamber feels heavier than before, thick with unsaid truths. You remember the first tray you ever received here. Golden peaches, plump and glowing, arranged on porcelain with blossoms scattered for decoration. The emperor himself had plucked one and placed it in your hand. That moment had felt like a promise. Now the promise has withered, just like the pears. From the corridor, faint laughter drifts in. You picture the favored concubines enjoying their meals, bowls of dumplings, fresh fruit still dripping with juice, servants fussing at their elbows. And the sound makes you chuckle dryly. At least no one will fight me for these pears, you whisper. Humor, even brittle, is easier than bitterness. You try to distract yourself, peeling the pear skin into spirals, arranging them into patterns on the plate. For a moment it looks almost artistic, like a delicate design. But the longer you stare, the more it feels pathetic, like trying to make poetry out of scraps. You brush the peels away with a sigh. The servant returns to collect the tray. She glances at the untouched rice, then at you, her expression unreadable. She doesn't ask why you didn't eat. She doesn't need to. Both of you know the answer. As the door closes behind her, you lean back against the wall, your stomach hollow but your pride intact. You refuse to finish the fruit, refuse to let them see you grateful for what was clearly meant as insult. The chamber smells faintly of rot, the pear's sweetness curdling in the air. You wave it away, muttering, "Even fruit turns on you eventually." The joke hangs heavy, but it makes you smile anyway. You close your eyes, letting the hunger settle like a stone. You will not beg for better. You will endure the bruised pears, the empty rice, the silence. Because in the palace, survival isn't about fullness. It's about refusing to break. There is one face that hasn't turned away. She is older than most of the attendants, her hair streaked with silver, her hands rough from years of labor. She moves quietly, not with the giggles of the younger maids, but with the steady calm of someone who has already seen too much. Tonight, she enters your chamber carrying nothing but a folded cloth. No tray, no incense, just a presence. She bows deeper than usual, and then sits on her knees at a respectful distance. For a long while, neither of you speaks. The silence isn't heavy this time, it's shared, almost gentle. When she finally looks up, her eyes carry something rare in this palace. Pity without malice, care without ambition. She begins to tell a story, her voice low and roughened by years. Not of emperors or victories, but of her own youth when she first served in the harem under a different ruler. She recalls another concubine, bright as the moon at first, then dimmed, then gone. I remember her laughter, the old woman says, but not her name. Funny, isn't it? How names vanish but laughter lingers. You listen, surprised at the warmth in her tone. It's not comfort in the ordinary sense, more like a reminder that what you're experiencing isn't unique. Others have endured this same erasure, and yet here sits this woman alive, bearing witness. She takes the cloth she brought and begins to mend the frayed hem of your robe, her fingers moving with slow precision. No servant is supposed to do this without orders, but she does it anyway, needle flashing in the lamplight. The thread isn't perfect. It doesn't match the silk exactly, but it holds. You watch her hands, mesmerized. Each stitch feels like an act of quiet rebellion, proof that someone still sees worth in what the palace has abandoned. Historians rarely write about women like her, the nameless attendants, the ones who patched robes and carried trays. Scholars debate whether concubines formed friendships or whether jealousy made trust impossible. You smile faintly at the irony. Perhaps the only true loyalty you'll ever know comes not from another concubine, nor from the emperor, but from an old servant with tired eyes. When she finishes, she sets the robe gently beside you. The world may not look at you, she whispers, but cloth still deserves care. Then, almost shyly, she places a small object in your palm, a carved wooden bead, worn smooth. For luck, she says. It helped me once. You curl your fingers around it, the wood warm from her hand. For the first time in weeks, you feel something solid, something that won't vanish with the next gust of gossip. You meet her gaze and nod, unable to speak. Gratitude catches in your throat like a stone. She rises, bows again, and leaves as quietly as she came. The chamber feels different now. Not less lonely, but less hopeless. The robe, though patched, looks stronger. The bead rests against your skin, small but stubborn. You chuckle softly. So this is my grand treasure, thread and wood. The words carry more humor than bitterness. Because for once the palace has given you something that isn't meant to diminish you. The lamp flickers, throwing long shadows on the wall. You clutch the bead tighter, letting its weight anchor you. Maybe tomorrow will bring more whispers, more empty trays, more silence. But tonight, you have a reminder that not all has been taken. And sometimes survival is stitched together one thread at a time. That night, as you rest with the patched robe around your shoulders and the bead tucked safely in your palm, a sound drifts through the corridor. It is faint at first, carried on the wind, music lilting and sweet. You rise, drawn toward it, your heart tightening with recognition. The melody is yours. You step closer to the lattice window, pressing your ear against the wooden frame. Yes, there it is. Notes you once played on your zither, notes that once made the emperor smile. Only now they are being sung, accompanied by flutes and drums, reshaped into a performance for another concubine's chamber. Your melody, stolen, renamed, gifted anew, your breath catches. You remember the night you first composed that song, how the emperor lingered by your side, asking for its meaning. You told him it was about the persistence of plum blossoms in winter, about beauty surviving cold. He had laughed softly, calling you my plum blossom. Now the words are twisted. You hear the singer praise someone else, another woman, another flower. Your song has been rewritten into her glory. The betrayal stings sharper than the gossip, sharper than the fading perfumes. A song is more than melody. It is memory, proof that you once mattered. And yet here it is, repurposed, as though your voice never existed. You lean your forehead against the screen, the wood cool against your skin. You want to scream, but you laugh instead, low, bitter, sharp. The palace doesn't just take your place, it takes your art too. Historians love to record imperial music, listing the compositions performed at banquets, praising the talent of favored women. They debate endlessly whether concubines themselves created those works, or whether court musicians shaped them. But here, in the silence of your chamber, you know the truth. Yes, you created. And yes, they erased you. The song swells louder, flutes trilling, voices rising in harmony. It is beautiful, more elaborate now than when you first played it. But to your ears it is hollow, counterfeit. You sink onto the bench, clutching the wooden bead, your patched robe brushing the floor. The irony is sharp. Your melody will outlive you, remembered in another's name. Still, a part of you smiles at the resilience of the song itself. Notes don't care whose lips shape them. They survive even when you don't. Perhaps that is its own form of immortality. Perhaps centuries from now someone will hear the tune and never know it was born in your lonely chamber. You pluck an invisible string in the air, humming softly along with the music outside. Your voice blends faintly with theirs, though they can't hear it. For a moment you reclaim the song, not as theirs, not as his, but as yours. When the music fades, silence crashes back heavier than before. You sit in the dim glow of your lamp murmuring, even a stolen song leaves an echo. The bead warms in your palm. You close your eyes, and for the first time in many nights you allow yourself to drift into uneasy sleep, with your own melody still whispering inside you. The night sky is clear, the air sharp with autumn chill. You push open the lattice window and let the moonlight spill across your floor. It paints everything silver, the patched robe, the zither in the corner, even the bead resting by your pillow. You step closer, lifting your face to the glow. The moon has always been a companion here, constant even as people shift, turn, and vanish. But tonight the moon feels cruel. Its light is too bright, too indifferent. You imagine the emperor standing under this same moon, laughing in another chamber, warmed by another woman's presence. The thought stings, though you tell yourself you're used to it. Moonlight doesn't discriminate. It pours itself equally on the favored and the forgotten. And yet when it touches you, it feels colder, as if even the heavens are mocking your solitude. You lean on the sill, listening to the garden below. Crickets sing in unison, their rhythm almost hypnotic. Once, you and the emperor stood in this very courtyard, watching fireflies float like sparks against the dark. He had compared your eyes to their glow, a compliment that made you laugh despite its clumsiness. You remember how the moon was full that night, too. Now standing here alone, the memory cuts deeper than any insult. Historians often write of the moon in poetry, from the harem, concubines sending verses across the courtyard, comparing their loneliness to the cold orb above. Scholars debate whether those poems were expressions of genuine sorrow or simply exercises in refined metaphor. You chuckle softly at the thought. If they could stand here in this silence, they'd know the poems were less metaphor, more survival. A breeze stirs the curtains, carrying the scent of damp earth. You close your eyes, letting it wash over you. For a moment, you pretend the wind itself is a hand brushing your cheek, a kindness the emperor no longer gives. The illusion is fragile, gone as soon as you open your eyes again. You speak aloud, voice hushed. You and I are alike, Moon. Bright to others, hollow inside. The joke is dry, but it makes you smile. At least the moon listens, even if it doesn't answer. Your reflection shimmers faintly on the glass of the window, blending with the moonlight. For a moment, it looks like another woman stands beside you, someone who hasn't been worn down by neglect. You reach out, touching the cold pane, but the image dissolves instantly. Just you, just the silence, just the moon. You draw the shutters halfway closed, dimming the light. Too much brightness only sharpens the loneliness. Still, you leave a crack open, because despite the cruelty, the moon is the only witness you have left. As you return to your bed, the quilt pulled tightly around you, the moonbeam still cuts across the chamber, a pale reminder. Comfort and torment, light and shadow, blessing and curse, it is all the same. You whisper, almost in a sigh, at least you can't be taken from me. The moon hangs steady in the sky, indifferent, eternal. The next morning you hear it before you see it, the low hiss of whispers curling through the corridors like smoke. Rumors travel faster than servants carrying tea, and in the palace gossip is more nourishing than rice. Today your name drifts on every tongue, not with praise but with sly amusement. You step into the hall and the air changes instantly. Two younger concubines bow as you pass, their smiles too sharp, their eyes too bright. The moment your back turns, their laughter bursts forth, muffled behind silk sleeves. You don't need to hear the words. You know the tone. They're telling your story again, The story of how you once held the emperor's gaze and how swiftly it slipped away. It spreads beyond the concubines. Servants glance at you sidelong, their expressions neutral but their eyes betraying curiosity. You catch fragments as they pass, forgotten, once beloved, pitiful. The words sting less because they're cruel, more because they're true. You walk on, your face calm, though inside you feel like a painting exposed to rain, colors bleeding, outlines blurring. There is one rumor in particular that burns hotter than the rest, that the emperor has forbidden your name to be spoken in his presence. You don't know if it's true, but the idea itself is poison enough. Once your name was poetry. Now it may be taboo. Historians centuries later will wonder about these whispers, debating whether concubines sabotaged one another deliberately or whether the system itself fostered rivalry. They will write in elegant phrases about palace intrigues and the politics of beauty. You laugh bitterly at the thought. For you, it isn't theory. It's daily life, a kind of slow suffocation. At the lotus pond, you overhear two attendants speaking carelessly, not realizing you're near. One says, "She lingers like a shadow. Why doesn't she just fade quietly?" The other snickers in reply. You step forward deliberately, your presence silencing them instantly. Their bows are stiff, their fear poorly hidden. You walk past without a word, but the phrase lingers in your ears, fade quietly. You return to your chamber, closing the door with more force than intended. The sound startles even you, a sharp break in the palace's endless murmur. You lean against the wood, exhaling slowly. For a moment you almost feel tears, but they refuse to fall. Instead, laughter slips out, dry, sharp, tired. Fade quietly? At least give me a script if I'm supposed to exit the stage. You sit by the window, staring out at the garden. Birds dart among the branches, chirping noisily, utterly indifferent to palace hierarchies. Their freedom is a mockery, but also a strange comfort. You hum softly under your breath. A fragment of your stolen song. Let them gossip. Let them twist your story. You still have your voice, even if only you hear it. The whispers continue beyond your walls, but you learn to let them flow around you, like water slipping past a stone. You cannot stop them, but you can refuse to drown. As the day wanes, you curl into your patched robe, clutching the wooden bead. The laughter outside is sharp, but inside silence is your shield. And you think to yourself, gossip may write the first draft, but survival writes the ending. The gossip dies down eventually, not because it stops, but because the palace finds new amusements. You, left in the quiet afterward, reach for a needle and thread. Embroidery has always been the safe refuge of women here. Silent, useful, endlessly repetitive. If words are ignored and music stolen, then stitches might be your last way of leaving a mark. You spread a length of silk across your lap, pale as moonlight. Your fingers tremble at first, but soon they find their rhythm, guiding the needle in and out. A flower begins to bloom beneath your touch, each petal layered carefully, threads catching the lamplight. The act is soothing. Every stitch is control, something the palace cannot take from you. In the past, you embroidered gifts for the emperor, robes, handkerchiefs, even a pillow cover adorned with dragons and clouds. He praised them once, calling your work as fine as spring dew. That pillow now likely rests beneath another's head, your stitches erased by someone else's presence. You imagine it and laugh softly. So be it. Tonight's embroidery is yours alone, not meant to curry favor, not meant to impress. Historians often dismiss embroidery as trivial, a pastime for idle hands. Yet some surviving pieces tell stories more honest than chronicles. Flowers stitched over stains, symbols hidden in patterns. Scholars still debate whether concubines used thread as secret language, stitching coded laments into their work. You smile at the thought, because tonight your flower feels like confession, delicate, stubborn, alive despite neglect. The chamber is quiet except for the faint hiss of silk under the needle. Outside, laughter rises again from the courtyard, but it feels distant, muffled by your focus. You lean closer, adjusting a stitch, tongue pressed against your teeth in concentration. For once, the palace falls away. There is only thread, silk, and you. You prick your finger, a small bead of blood blooming against the pale fabric. You pause, then chuckle. "A personal signature," you whisper. The red dot is tiny, barely visible, but it reminds you that your body is still yours, still capable of marking the world, even if only in pinpricks. The flower takes shape slowly, its petals curling outward, Stubborn against the plain background, you run your fingertips over the stitches, feeling the raised threads like veins. This is proof. You exist, you create, you endure. Even if no one else ever sees it, the fabric carries your story now. You tuck the finished piece into a small chest beside your bed, where only you will know it rests. Not for the emperor, not for the courtiers, not even for history, just for yourself. The lamp burns low, casting long shadows across the floor. You set the needle aside, flexing your sore fingers. A dry smile tugs at your lips. Not exactly a grand legacy, but at least it doesn't gossip. You lie down, pulling the patched robe tighter, and let your eyes drift shut. Somewhere in your chest, the rhythm of needle and thread lingers, steady and patient, like a lullaby you stitched for yourself. Morning light filters into the chamber, pale and cool. A clerk passes through the hall outside, carrying scrolls bound in red silk. You catch only a glimpse, but something in the way he cradles the bundle draws your attention. Records, lists, the written heartbeat of the palace. Later, curiosity gnaws at you. You wander toward the outer archives, a chamber lined with shelves that stretch higher than a person can reach. The air smells of ink and dust, parchment curling slightly at the edges. Clerks shuffle about, their brushes scratching in endless rhythm, recording names, events, rituals. You scan the scrolls until your eyes find a familiar section, registers of the concubines. Once your name gleamed there in careful calligraphy, each character drawn like art. You lean closer now, heart tightening. The space is still there, but the characters are smudged, scraped, altered until barely legible. The brushstrokes of your name have been dissolved, as if rinsed by water. Your breath catches. It feels like a second death. The first when you were forgotten, the second when you were erased. You trace the mark with your fingertip, but the parchment is rough, fibers torn where the ink once lived. One clerk glances at you nervously. He bows quickly, avoiding your eyes. You see guilt in his movement, though he says nothing. Perhaps he knows you've discovered what was meant to remain hidden, the deliberate unmaking of a person. Historians will puzzle over such gaps centuries later. They'll argue whether names vanished due to political intrigue, clerical error, or deliberate cleansing of memory. They'll call it damnatio memoriae, or they'll shrug at the mystery of missing records. You know it isn't mystery. It's punishment sharpened into silence. You step back, the scroll still open before you, your hand trembling. You almost laugh at the absurdity. To be erased from ink is worse than to be mocked. At least laughter acknowledges existence. This is denial, as if you never breathed, never sang, never embroidered a single flower. You whisper to yourself, so this is how they killed twice. The sound echoes faintly, lost among the shelves. The clerk rolls the scroll quickly, tucking it away as if to hide the wound from your eyes. He bows again, lower this time, then retreats into the maze of shelves. You remain standing there, the space before you suddenly empty, your name stolen. You return to your chamber in a daze. The bead rests in your palm, solid and warm, proof you are still here. You clutch it tightly, grounding yourself against the hollowness. A dry laugh escapes. Well, at least my mistakes won't make it into the history books. The humor is brittle, but it steadies you. You sit by the window, watching dust dance in the sunlight. Dust, the one thing the palace never erases, and in that dust you vow silently, you may be erased from their records, but not from yourself. The day of the ancestral rites arrives, a solemn occasion when every corner of the palace hums with purpose. The air is thick with incense and anticipation. The courtyards are swept until the stones gleam, and attendants scurry like bees in a hive. You know the rhythm well. You once walked proudly in those processions, robes rustling, hairpins glittering in the sun. This morning, though, no summons comes. You wait, listening for the footsteps that never arrive. The silence is answer enough. Without the emperor's favor, you are not worthy to stand before the altars of his ancestors. From your chamber, you can hear the distant drums marking the beginning of the ritual. They strike deep, slow notes that reverberate through the palace walls, each beat a reminder of your absence. You step toward the lattice window and catch glimpses of the procession, lines of concubines moving in perfect order, their sleeves flowing like waves, their faces serene masks of devotion. Once, you held a place among them, carrying offerings of silk and fruit, bowing before ancestral tablets, carved with names of emperors past. Now you stand apart, an outsider within the very palace that cages you. You recall the weight of those rituals, the incense heavy in your lungs, the chants vibrating in your chest, the stone floor cold beneath your knees. You hated the discomfort, yet you long for it now. Even pain was a kind of belonging. Historians describe these rites with awe, the precision, the grandeur, the echoes of divine legitimacy. But they rarely note the shadows cast by those excluded. Scholars still argue whether absence at such ceremonies signaled disgrace, punishment, or simple oversight. You smile bitterly at their debates. In the lived moment, absence feels like banishment, no matter the reason. As the drums roll on, you step back into your chamber. The silence here is almost unbearable, broken only by the rustle of your robe. You light a small lamp, its flame weak, and kneel before it. You bow your head, murmuring a prayer not to emperors or ancestors, but to yourself. If you cannot honor the dead with the others, you will honor your own survival in private. The smoke curls upward, thin and fragile. You watch it twist and dissolve, imagining it carries your name to some place where it still matters. When the procession ends, the courtyards erupt in chatter. Laughter, footsteps, the clink of ceremonial vessels, all signs of a ritual completed without you. You remain still, your lamp flickering. A dry laugh escapes your throat. At least I didn't have to kneel on stone all morning. It's a poor consolation, but in this palace, sarcasm is sometimes the only shield left. You extinguish the lamp with a soft breath. The room fills with the faint scent of smoke, your private offering swallowed by silence, and you whisper to yourself, forgotten in ceremony, but not in spirit. The drums linger in your chest long after the ceremony ends. Their echoes roll through the corridors like distant thunder, fading but relentless. You sit on the edge of your bed, the patched robe pulled around your knees, listening as if each beat is a reminder. They went, you did not. They bowed, you remained seated. They mattered, you did not. Evening approaches, and yet the sound still hums in your bones. You close your eyes and remember what it felt like to kneel among them, the cold bite of stone pressing into your skin, the burn in your thighs as you held the pose, the incense so thick it stung your eyes. Painful, yes, but it tethered you to something larger, a reminder that you were part of the story. Tonight you feel untethered, like a kite whose string has been cut. You walk into the corridor, your slippers whispering against polished stone. The emptiness here magnifies the sound of your steps, hollow and lonely. At the far end, you glimpse servants carrying ritual vessels back to storage. The bronze gleams heavy with symbolism. They pass you without pause, as though you're as invisible as the air itself. Historians will later marvel at the grandeur of such rites. The music, the precision, the offerings of silk and fruit. The emperor's bowed head before the tablets of his ancestors. But they will not write about the concubines who were barred, who pressed their ears against the walls to catch the sound of drums they weren't allowed to follow. Scholars still debate whether absence meant disgrace or indifference. You shake your head. Absence feels the same either way, like exile wrapped in silence. You lean against a wooden pillar, your hand resting on the carved surface. The wood is cool, unyielding. You imagine it has heard countless women like you, women who whispered their grievances into its grain. Perhaps that is why the palace creaks at night. Not ghosts, but the weight of unspoken sorrow. The drums fall silent at last, leaving a void so deep it makes your ears ring. You almost miss them. At least the sound was something to hold on to. You chuckle dryly. Funny how you can miss even the noise that reminds you you're forgotten. The sky outside darkens, the first stars appearing. Their faint shimmer feels more merciful than the grand, arrogant moon. Stars don't demand attention. They shine quietly, content with their smallness. You envy them for that. Back in your chamber, you light a small lamp and place it on the windowsill. Its flame flickers, almost shy. It isn't a drum. It isn't a procession. It isn't a banquet. But it is yours. You watch it sway in the night breeze, a tiny defiance against the vast, indifferent dark. You murmur, almost to the flame itself, I may be absent from their ceremony, but not from myself. The flame bends, wavers, then steadies, and in that fragile glow, you find enough light to endure another night. The corridors stretch endlessly ahead of you, long veins of stone and wood running through the palace like the ribs of some ancient beast. At night they are colder, emptier, their silence magnified by the faint drip of water somewhere far away. You step into one now, your footsteps echoing too loudly for comfort. Each tap of your slipper ricochets off the walls, as if mocking you with reminders that no one walks beside you anymore. Lanterns hang at intervals, their flames fluttering in the draught. The pools of light don't quite touch, leaving pockets of shadow that swallow everything in between. You walk through them like crossing into little islands, alone each time the darkness surrounds you. Once you would have been flanked by attendants, their chatter and footsteps filling the void. Now only the hollow slap of your own pace keeps you company. You trail your fingers along the wall, its surface cool, the carved patterns rough beneath your skin. Dragons, phoenixes, clouds, symbols of majesty and eternity. They don't comfort you. If anything, they feel like reminders of how small you are in comparison. The palace will endure long after you've vanished. Your laughter, your tears, even your name scraped from the records. None of it will leave so much as a crack in these stones. Historians like to describe these corridors as majestic passageways, marveling at their craftsmanship, their symbolism, their length. They rarely wonder how suffocating they feel when you walk them alone. Scholars still argue whether concubines were free to wander or confined to their chambers. You chuckle under your breath. Free to wander is hardly freedom when all the paths circle back to the same silence. At one turn, you pass a tall window where the moonlight spills across the floor, silvering the stones. The light catches on your robe, highlighting the uneven stitches where it was mended. You pause, staring at the contrast. The robe may be patched, but it still carries you forward step after step. Perhaps that's survival. Not shining, just moving. Far down the hall, laughter bursts suddenly. Sharp, youthful, carried on the air like a spark. You freeze, listening. A group of favored concubines sweep past at the far end, their silhouettes framed in lamplight. They don't see you, or perhaps they pretend not to. Their voices fade quickly, leaving you once again with your echoes. You exhale slowly, a dry smile tugging at your lips. At least my footsteps don't need an audience, you mutter. The sound of your own voice reassures you, proof you haven't dissolved into shadow entirely. You keep walking, letting the rhythm of your steps settle into a kind of meditation. Corridor after corridor, island after island of light, the palace breathes around you, vast and indifferent. But as long as you move, you remind yourself that you are still here. When you finally return to your chamber, the emptiness feels almost familiar, like a cloak you've grown used to wearing. You sit by the window, looking back at the corridor you left behind. Its silence follows you, but so does your echo. And in that echo, faint as it is, you hear the smallest reminder. You still have a voice, even if only the walls reply. The tray arrives later than usual, carried by a servant who doesn't bother to bow deeply. She sets it down and leaves in silence, her footsteps already fading before you glance at what she has brought. A single cup of tea, pale and cloudy, steam barely rising. You lift it gingerly, but the porcelain is cool against your fingertips. The tea has already gone cold. You sip anyway. The taste is flat, bitter at the edges. Nothing like the fragrant brews you once enjoyed. Oolong kissed with jasmine, green tea fresh as spring leaves. This is stale, overbrewed, neglected. You hold the cup close, searching for warmth that isn't there. It feels less like refreshment and more like a reminder. You are no longer worth the effort of boiling water. Once, you remember. Attendants poured for you with trembling precision, ensuring the temperature was perfect, the aroma rich. The emperor himself once took a cup from your hands, sipping with a smile that felt like sunlight. Now even tea mocks you. Historians note the elaborate tea ceremonies of the court, describing how flavor and fragrance symbolized refinement. But they rarely mention what cold tea meant. Scholars debate whether such neglect was deliberate or a servant's laziness. You laugh quietly to yourself. Here, nothing is an accident. Every detail whispers status, and your tea tonight whispers forgotten. You set the cup down, watching the thin film form on its surface. The reflection there is warped, your face rippling in the faint brown liquid. You almost expect the tea to speak, to tell you that your time is over. Instead, it simply cools further, until even the pretense of warmth is gone. Outside, laughter carries again from another chamber, bright and full. You imagine their tea steaming, perfumed with petals accompanied by delicate sweets. The contrast sharpens your solitude. You smile dryly, muttering, "At least I won't burn my tongue." You push the cup away, the bitter taste lingering on your lips. The room smells faintly of old leaves, a ghost of what tea is meant to be. You light a lamp and sit quietly, your fingers curled around the wooden bead, the patched robe heavy across your shoulders. The cold tea remains on the table, untouched, its surface darkening as the night deepens. And in its stillness you see your own reflection again, faded, cooling, but not yet gone. You wander the gallery one afternoon, a place you once loved for its painted scrolls and portraits. The walls breathe with color, landscapes of mountains veiled in mist, scenes of hunts and feasts, portraits of women whose beauty was meant to be immortal. You pause at the spot where your likeness used to hang, a painting commissioned when the emperor first took notice of you. You remember the artist's steady hand, the careful way he captured your eyes, the silk of your robes, the tilt of your smile. The wall is bare now, only faint outlines remain. A pale rectangle where the scroll once rested, its hooks empty. You step closer, fingertips brushing the cold surface. The absence is louder than any presence. Your image has been lifted away, erased from sight just as your name was scraped from the records. You look down the hall and see other portraits still hanging, women radiant in silks, their painted eyes following you with smug serenity. Some are long dead, yet their beauty endures in pigment. Yours has already been deemed unworthy of preservation. Historians centuries later will admire these portraits, praising the brushwork, the symbolism, the elegance of lines. They will never know which faces are missing, which women were erased because they fell from favor. Scholars debate whether such removals were intentional or simply a matter of decay. You laugh bitterly under your breath. Paintings do not vanish by accident. They are taken down, rolled away, hidden in storerooms where dust swallows memory. You recall the night your portrait was first unveiled, how the emperor lingered before it, nodding in approval. He had traced the edge of your sleeve on the canvas with his gaze, calling you a jewel worthy of ink. That jewel is gone now, replaced by nothing. Even the blank wall seems to smirk at you. A servant carrying scrolls passes by. You ask, your voice calm, where the painting has gone. She lowers her head, muttering something about storage before scurrying away. Storage? Such a polite word for burial. You lean back against the wall, pressing your palm flat against the empty space. The stone is cool, unyielding. For a moment you close your eyes and imagine the painting still there, your younger self smiling down at you, untouched by loss. But when you open them, there is only emptiness. You chuckle softly, shaking your head. Well, at least I won't have to watch myself fade. The humor tastes bitter, but it keeps the tears at bay. The gallery feels colder as you turn away. The painted women still gaze down, their beauty fixed, their smiles eternal. You walk on beneath their eyes, your own portrait erased but your shadow still moving across the floor. And in that shadow, you remind yourself, even without pigment, you are still here, breathing, enduring. The night stretches long, a fabric without seams. You lie beneath the canopy of your bed, eyes fixed on the embroidered phoenix above. Its wings shimmer faintly in the lamplight, but to you it looks trapped, stitched into place, unable to fly. The irony doesn't escape you. Sleep refuses to come. You turn onto your side, then your back, then your other side, chasing comfort that never settles. The silence is broken only by the steady chorus of insects outside. Crickets chirp, cicadas drone. A rhythmic reminder that the world beyond these walls is still alive. Their persistence grates and soothes at once. You imagine them mocking you with their endless chatter, as if to say, we sing even when no one listens. Once, nights were filled with warmth, candles glowing, laughter spilling across silk sheets, the emperor's voice murmuring close to your ear. Now the space beside you is hollow, cool, an emptiness that no quilt can disguise. You reach across it anyway, your hand brushing smooth fabric, half hoping to find another body there. But there is only absence, colder than stone. You rise, pacing your chamber in slow circles. The floor creaks softly under your steps, each sound amplified in the stillness. Shadows cling to the corners, deep and watchful. You catch yourself whispering aloud, as though to an unseen audience. At least the crickets don't ignore me. Your dry laugh bounces off the walls before vanishing. Historians rarely record these sleepless nights. They note ceremonies, births, deaths, scandals. They don't mention women lying awake, staring at embroidered ceilings, listening to insects for company. Scholars argue whether concubines lived lives of leisure or torment. But leisure doesn't look like pacing a chamber at midnight, with your own thoughts clawing at you. You return to your bed and pull the quilt over your shoulders. The patched hem brushes your cheek, the stitches rough against your skin. You hold the wooden bead in your palm, rolling it between your fingers like a talisman. Its solid weight steadies you. At least it doesn't slip away. The insects sing louder. You close your eyes and let their rhythm wash over you. If you imagine hard enough, the sound becomes waves on a shore, or the hum of a distant crowd, anything but the truth of your solitude. For a moment you trick yourself into peace, but the illusion breaks when a gust of wind rattles the shutters, snapping you back into the chamber. You sigh, pressing your face into the pillow. Sleep will come eventually, if only out of exhaustion. Until then, you endure the night note by note, cricket by cricket, heartbeat by heartbeat. And somewhere in the darkness you murmur, "Even shadows must sleep eventually." Morning comes with a different kind of silence, the heavy shuffle of footsteps you know too well. Two eunuchs enter your chamber, their expressions polite, their movements practiced. They bow, say nothing, and begin opening the lacquered chest at the foot of your bed. Inside lie the ornaments that once crowned your hair, the bracelets that once clinked on your wrists, the jade pendants that once caught the emperor's eye. One by one, they lift them out. The pearls gleam faintly in the pale light, the gold dull from disuse. Each piece seems smaller now, lighter, as if it has already lost its meaning the moment it left your hand. They place the ornaments into a wooden box, lining them carefully as though packing away memories. You watch in silence, your hands folded tightly in your lap. Once these treasures marked your status. Each jewel was a signal. She is favored, she is seen, she matters. Now they are nothing but trinkets being returned to the treasury, stripped of their story. You recall the day the emperor placed a necklace around your throat, the cool weight of jade against your skin. He had smiled faintly, saying it matched your eyes. That necklace is the first to vanish into the box. You laugh softly under your breath. Apparently your eyes are out of fashion now. 2. Historians will later catalogue such items in meticulous lists. 1 gold hairpin shaped like a phoenix, 2 bracelets of carved jade, a necklace of freshwater pearls. They will admire the craftsmanship, debate the symbolism, perhaps even display them in glass cases. What they won't note is how they were taken, how the loss of ornaments felt like the stripping away of identity itself. Scholars still argue whether these removals were routine or punitive. You know better. They are both. The eunuchs finish their work quickly, bow once more, and carry the box away. The sound of their footsteps fades, leaving behind an emptier chamber. Your shelves are bare. Your mirror reflects only plainness. Without the shimmer of jewels, the room looks like it belongs to someone else entirely. You walk to the table and touch the spot where the box had rested. The wood is warm, still holding the echo of weight. You press your palm flat against it, as if trying to hold on to something that is already gone. A chuckle escapes you, dry and sharp. Well, at least I won't have to worry about thieves. The joke tastes bitter, but it keeps you upright. You sit back, fingers curling around the wooden bead still in your pocket. Unlike jade and gold, no one wants it. That is precisely why it matters. It is yours, unclaimed, unremarkable, yet solid. The chamber feels lighter now, though not in a way that comforts. Stripped of glitter, it holds only you, bare, unadorned, still breathing. And perhaps you think as you close your eyes, endurance itself is the finest jewel they can never reclaim. The room feels different once the jewels are gone. Emptier, lighter, but in a way that unsettles rather than soothes. You sit in the middle of it, glancing at the walls, the shelves, the bed. For the first time, you wonder if these too might be taken. The thought gnaws at you slowly. What if they decide you no longer deserve even a chamber? The palace is full of stories, whispered like warnings. You've heard of women moved from their rooms overnight, reassigned to colder, smaller quarters with no windows, no silk screens, no trace of beauty. Others were sent to outer buildings, still within the walls but far from the center of life, where shadows grew thicker and servants came less often. A living exile, you run your hand along the carved wooden screen by your bed, tracing the phoenix etched there. The grooves are deep, worn smooth by countless fingers over generations. It is the one piece of permanence you feel in the room, and yet you know permanence doesn't exist here. If the emperor commands, even the phoenix can vanish. You chuckle quietly, though your stomach twists. Imagine me dragging my patched robe down some drafty corridor to a broom closet they call a chamber. The joke lands bitterly, but the image sticks. That night, sleep is restless. Every creak of the floorboards makes you tense. Every murmur in the corridor sounds like the first step of servants come to strip the room bare. You clutch the wooden bead tightly in your palm, pressing it into your skin until it leaves a dent. Proof you're still here, still anchored, even if everything else is taken. Historians sometimes mention the relocations of concubines, noting them as bureaucratic necessities, chambers reassigned, quarters repurposed. Scholars debate whether these shifts were meant as punishment or merely practicality. You smile dryly at their theories. For the woman moved in the dead of night, it hardly matters. Punishment, practicality, it feels the same. A reminder that nothing you call yours really belongs to you. At dawn, you step outside your chamber, half expecting to find servants waiting with orders. But the corridor is quiet, empty. Your room is still yours for now. You inhale sharply, relief mixing with dread. Survival in the palace is measured in for now. You return inside and press your back against the door, exhaling slowly. The walls seem closer than before, as though they too are whispering threats. You run your hand along the bed frame, the desk, the chest. Small rituals to remind yourself these things still exist. Still yours, and then, almost in defiance, you laugh. If they take this room, I'll haunt it. The sound echoes softly, a half-joke, half-promise. The chamber remains. Silent, fragile, temporary, but still yours. By the next evening, the food tray arrives later than ever. You already know what to expect. But hope still flickers, ridiculous and stubborn. When the servant sets it down, you glance at the dishes. Rice hardened into clumps, a thin broth with oil floating on top, and a few wilted greens that look as though they were rescued from the refuse pile. The smell is faintly sour, enough to turn your stomach before you even taste. You pick up your chopsticks anyway. The rice crumbles dryly between them, sticking in lumps that refuse to separate. You chew a bite and feel it scrape against your tongue, as if punishment has found a way to disguise itself as dinner. The broth is no better, watery, flavorless, a liquid that mocks the memory of real soup. You laugh softly into the empty room. Gourmet dining, palace edition. Once your meals were feasts, arriving in lacquered boxes painted with phoenixes, steamed fish glistening with ginger, dumplings plump and fragrant, fruit freshly sliced, its juice still clinging to porcelain edges. Servants hovered anxiously, ensuring every bite was perfect. Now they don't even bother warming the food. Historians write endlessly about the delicacies of the imperial table. They marvel at records of roasted peacock, candied lotus, even rumors of exotic imports from beyond the borders. But they rarely mention the leftovers, how forgotten concubines were fed as afterthoughts, meals stripped of dignity. Scholars still argue whether this was neglect or deliberate cruelty. You smirk bitterly. Why not both? You push the tray aside, appetite gone. Hunger gnaws at your belly, but pride is sharper. To eat this feels like accepting the message hidden in every grain of cold rice. You are less. You are forgotten. The chamber fills with the sour scent of the broth cooling further, seeping into the air like defeat. You light a stick of incense, one of the last you've saved, to cover the smell. The smoke curls upward, sweet and stubborn, masking the stench of neglect. As the night deepens, you sit by the window, listening to distant laughter again. You imagine them feasting still, their plates heavy with dishes that once belonged to you. You chuckle dryly, shaking your head. At least I won't get indigestion. You pull the patched robe tighter, holding the wooden bead in your hand. Your stomach growls softly, but you force yourself to breathe steadily, slowly, refusing to let the hunger own you. The tray sits untouched, a silent declaration. If they wish to starve you of dignity, you will answer with defiance, even if only by refusing a bowl of cold broth. The palace bursts into life for the festival, a celebration so grand that even the distant city hears the echoes of drums and laughter. Lanterns bloom everywhere, red and gold spheres swaying like captured suns. The courtyards glow with firelight, silk banners ripple overhead, and music spills from every corner. You hear it all from your chamber, each sound a reminder that joy thrives just beyond your reach. You should be there. Once you stood among the glittering procession, your robes embroidered with phoenixes, your hair crowned with jade pins that caught the torchlight. You remember the way the emperor's gaze lingered as dancers whirled around you, the faint smile he offered when you raised your cup. Tonight, the same festival unfolds, but your place has vanished as neatly as your portrait, your name, your pearls. You step to the window. The sky beyond the walls glows with lanterns drifting upward, tiny stars that refuse to fade. Laughter rolls across the air like waves. A flute sings, its high notes threading through the night. You close your eyes, pretending for a heartbeat that the music belongs to you again. But when you open them, you see shadows of other women spinning in silk, their faces lit by firelight, faces younger, fresher, chosen. Historians write about these festivals with awe, the abundance of food, the splendor of the performances, the emperor's presence at the center of it all. Scholars argue whether such events were truly about celebration or political display. But no chronicle records the woman who listens from a darkened chamber, who watches lanterns rise without a single flame to call her own. Your stomach growls at the scents drifting in. Roasted duck, sweet rice cakes, lychees sticky with honey. You laugh softly to yourself. Well, at least I'll save on calories. The joke tastes thin, but it keeps the ache from spilling into tears. You light your lamp, a single flame against the festival's blaze. Its glow is weak, barely touching the corners of your chamber. You sit beside it, clutching the wooden bead, and imagine it as your lantern, small, hidden, but still alight. The music swells outside, voices rising in chorus. You hum along under your breath, your tune off-key, your voice soft but defiant. They cannot stop you from joining in, even if only in whispers. When the fireworks crackle in the sky, their colors painting the night in crimson and gold, you press your forehead against the window lattice. For a fleeting moment, sparks reflect in your eyes, making them shine as they once did. Then the light fades, leaving only the quiet lamp at your side. The festival roars on without you. But in the silence of your chamber, you hold your bead, you hum your tune, and you remind yourself, a lantern need not be seen by the crowd to burn. The morning after the festival, your body feels heavy. Not from wine or dancing, you had none of those, but from the kind of fatigue that seeps deep, curling into your bones. You rise slowly, a faint dizziness clouding your vision. Your throat is raw, your skin clammy, your breath just a little too shallow. Illness. You sit back on the edge of your bed, waiting for the inevitable summons of the Imperial physician. Once, at the slightest hint of a cough, attendants rushed to your side. The best doctors in the Empire examined you, their remedies brought in gilded boxes, their words soothing. But the corridor remains empty. No footsteps approach. No one has come. You wrap the patched robe tighter around you, shivering despite the mild day. Your hand finds the wooden bead, its smooth surface cool against your fevered palm. You clutch it as though it can anchor you against the wave pressing down on your chest. Hours pass. A servant eventually appears, carrying not medicine but a small dish of congee, plain and lukewarm. She sets it down quickly, avoiding your gaze, and leaves without a word. You laugh softly, voice hoarse. So this is the cure, rice and silence. Historians often note the treatments of imperial physicians, recording exotic herbs, acupuncture, elaborate prescriptions. They marvel at the lengths the court would go to preserve favored lives, but they rarely mention those who fell sick after their favor faded. Scholars debate whether neglect of the ill was calculated or simply forgotten in the machinery of court life. You know the truth. Neglect itself was the medicine, bitter and intentional. You lie back staring at the canopy, its embroidered phoenix still trapped mid-flight. The fever makes it blur, wings bending, twisting into shapes that almost move. You close your eyes and let the illusion carry you, imagining the bird breaking free, soaring beyond the palace walls. When you wake again, the congee has cooled to paste, untouched. Your throat burns, your body aches, but no physician comes. The silence in the corridor is absolute. You whisper to yourself, half delirious, half amused. At least I won't die of an overdose of care. The words rasp in your throat, but they make you smile. You curl into your quilt, the bead still in your hand, and breathe slowly, steadily. Fever may grip your body, but it cannot claim your will to endure. Not yet. The fever lingers for days, but the palace moves on as if you were never sick. From your bed, you hear the shuffle of clerks outside, their brushes scratching furiously as they draft new decrees. Each morning, notices are read aloud in the courtyard. Promotions, rewards, appointments, names spoken with weight and reverence. Your own is never among them. You drag yourself to the lattice window, quilt wrapped tightly around your shoulders. The voice of the herald carries clearly, rising and falling with practiced solemnity. So-and-so granted silk robes. So-and-so granted a new chamber. So-and-so praised for her elegance. The names wash over you like cold water, each one striking harder because of the absence of your own. Once your name rolled from those lips too. You remember the shiver of hearing it proclaimed, how the air seemed to thrum with significance, how envious glances darted toward you. It was like being carved into history with sound. Now the silence where your name should be feels louder than the announcements themselves. You retreat to your desk, pulling out an old decree that once bore your name. The ink has faded slightly, but the characters are still clear, sharp, undeniable. Proof that you were once seen, once valued. You trace them with your fingertip, the paper rough beneath your skin. It feels like touching a ghost. Historians pore over decrees like these, cataloguing them as markers of power. Scholars debate whether the emperor himself dictated every reward, or whether ministers shaped the words. But none of them know what it feels like to stand just beyond earshot, waiting for a name that never comes. They don't understand the hollowness that swells when ink ignores you. A maidservant slips into your chamber, bowing quickly before setting a small bundle on the table. It is not silk, not jewels, not honor, only extra lamp oil. She avoids your eyes, but you feel the quiet kindness in the gesture. You smile faintly. Perhaps she too hears the decrees and recognizes the silence that swallows your name. You light the lamp, letting its flame burn brighter than usual, as though it can compete with the herald's voice outside. The irony makes you laugh softly. No decree for me today, but at least the lamp approves. The voices fade eventually, the announcements complete. You sit in the glow of your small flame, holding the wooden bead, the old decree spread before you. On paper you once mattered. In sound you no longer do, and in the quiet afterward you whisper into the lamp's flickering light, "History may forget my name, but I will not." The palace stirs with new excitement, a fresh arrival. Whispers ripple down the corridors before she even sets foot inside. Young, radiant, clever, her beauty compared to moonlight itself. By the time you catch sight of her, she is already surrounded by attendants fussing over every fold of her gown. Her laughter carries like bells, high and confident, unbroken by the weight of palace life. You watch from the shadows of the gallery as she glides past, her silk robes shimmering in the lamplight. Her eyes dart with curiosity, drinking in the grandeur that no longer dazzles you. She moves as though the palace is hers already, as though she has been chosen before the emperor has even spoken, and perhaps she has. The emperor notices her quickly, too quickly. You hear it in the sudden change of footsteps outside your chamber, the bursts of laughter carried from distant halls, the flurry of gifts sent to her quarters. The palace moves around her like a river, swift and eager to serve. You left on the bank, feel the current rush away. You remember when it was you. The same flurry, the same laughter, the same gifts piling at your door. You smile bitterly, shaking your head. History repeats itself, but this time I'm the footnote. Historians record such arrivals with flourish, naming the women who captivated emperors and reshaped court politics. Scholars argue whether beauty, wit, or ambition mattered most. They rarely note what happens to those already inside, the ones displaced quietly, made invisible not by scandal but by novelty. You know the truth. Sometimes survival isn't lost in battle but in boredom. You glimpse the new favorite again days later, her hair adorned with fresh jewels, her cheeks flushed with victory. She passes you without pause, though her eyes flicker in recognition for a moment. Pity? Triumph? It hardly matters. The palace has taught her as it once taught you. One rises by ignoring those already fallen. That night you lie awake, listening to music drifting from her chamber. Flutes, drums, laughter, a celebration of beginnings. You clutch the wooden bead in your hand, its plainness grounding you. She has her pearls, her silks, her songs. You have thread, a patched robe, and a bead. The contrast makes you chuckle, though the sound cracks at the edges. You murmur into the dark, "Enjoy it while you can, little moon." The palace loves to eclipse its stars. The music swells, bright and careless, while in your chamber the silence settles heavier. But you breathe through it steady, stubborn, because you know what she does not yet understand. Favor is a flame, and flames always burn out. The mirrors and portraits remind you daily, but nothing underscores the truth like the sight of youth blooming around you. You pass through the courtyard one afternoon and see them, the younger concubines, their laughter bright, their hair glossy, their faces smooth as polished jade. They move lightly as if gravity itself prefers them. You watch from a shaded corner, the weight of years pressing harder on your shoulders. Your reflection in bronze tells no lies. The skin beneath your eyes is faintly shadowed, the corners of your mouth softened by weariness. Not ruin, not decay, just the inevitable drift of time. Once you thought the emperor adored you for more than your face, for the poems you wrote, the songs you composed, the wit that made him laugh. But youth is a melody louder than any poem, and it drowns everything else. You return to your chamber and run your fingers over your hair, finding the strands that no longer shine as they once did. You remember the emperor's hand combing through it, his voice murmuring, like silk. You chuckle dryly, staring at the few rebellious greys, like silk left too long in the sun. Historians rarely speak of aging in the harem. They write about beauty as if it is permanent, frozen in time. Scholars argue whether concubines held power through intelligence, charm, or artistry. Yet few admit the truth. In this palace, aging is the most unforgivable sin. You feel it in every dismissive glance, every whispered comparison, every younger smile sharpened into a blade. At night, you light your lamp and sit before the mirror. You study your face as though it belongs to someone else. Someone wiser, yes, but someone invisible. You touch the patched robe around your shoulders, remembering how once you needed no robe at all. Your youth itself was clothing, dazzling, and sufficient. Outside, the younger women practiced dances for the emperor. Their voices carry through the courtyard high and eager. You hear the shuffle of silk, the tinkle of bangles, the rise of music. You imagine them swirling under the emperor's gaze, each turn of their bodies a promise of novelty. You laugh softly, almost kindly. Let them dance. The floor is always hungriest for the freshest feet. You clutch the wooden bead again, its plainness oddly comforting. Unlike beauty, it doesn't fade. Its surface is worn, yes, but smoother for it. Strength hidden in its simplicity. You let it rest in your palm like a reminder. There is life after youth, even if the palace refuses to see it. The mirror reflects your face one last time before you blow out the lamp. Darkness covers you, kind and indifferent. For a moment it feels like the only place where age and youth mean nothing at all. The announcement of the banquet arrives like a thunderclap through the palace. Servants rush about with trays of porcelain. Musicians tune their instruments. Cooks scurry with baskets of fruit and meat. The entire compound hums with anticipation. You watch from your chamber doorway, the activity flooding past you like a river that refuses to carry you with it. You once loved these nights. The lanterns strung high in the courtyards, glowing like fireflies trapped in silk. The tables heavy with dishes so rich, they perfumed the air for days afterward. The emperor seated at the center, his laughter booming, his cup always lifted toward whichever woman sat nearest his gaze. You remember being that woman. Once tonight you are not invited. No summons, no robe laid out, no hairpins polished for you. Your chamber remains dim while the palace outside blazes with light. From the distance you hear the crash of cymbals, the cry of flutes, the laughter of concubines raising their voices like bells. You try not to imagine it, but the images creep in anyway. The emperor leaning close to a new favorite, the delicate tilt of her wrist as she pours his wine, the way her jewels scatter light across her hair. You press your lips together, fighting the sharp tug in your chest. Historians love to describe these banquets in detail, the abundance, the spectacle, the splendor. Scholars debate whether they were genuine celebrations or calculated displays of power. They don't mention the women left behind, the ones who sat in silence while music thundered just beyond their walls. They don't note the taste of absence, which is sharper than any dish of spiced duck or candied lotus. You light your small lamp and set a plain cup of water before you. The contrast makes you laugh low and dry. A banquet of one, you whisper, lifting the cup in mock salute. The water is flat, tasteless, but you sip it as though it were the emperor's finest wine. Outside, fireworks crackle in the night sky, colors bursting over the palace roofs. Through the lattice window you see only fragments. Half a bloom of red, a streak of gold. The rest remains hidden. You smile faintly. Even the sky forgets to invite me. The music swells, reaching a peak that rattles your shutters. You hum softly under your breath, matching its rhythm, adding your own invisible note to the revelry. They cannot stop you from joining, even if only as a shadow. When the sounds finally fade near dawn, you sit surrounded by silence once more. Your cup is empty, your lamp nearly out. The palace sleeps after its feast, but you remain awake, clutching the wooden bead, and you think perhaps survival is its own banquet, even when served cold. The thought creeps into your mind one morning. Perhaps your family still remembers you. The idea is dangerous, almost laughable, yet it burns stubbornly. You sit at your desk, brush in hand, inkstone glistening like a pool of night. Slowly you begin to write. The words come haltingly at first. You tell them you are well, though your hand trembles as you shape the lie. You speak of the changing seasons, of lanterns that filled the sky during the festival, of the scent of plum blossoms drifting into the courtyards. You do not mention the bruised pears, the cold tea, the scraped records, the silence. You soften everything, as if silk could be woven over stone. When you finish, the page is delicate, restrained, each stroke a tether to the world beyond these walls. You fold it carefully and seal it with trembling fingers. A eunuch carries it away, his bow shallow, his eyes unreadable. You watch him vanish into the corridor, your heart trailing after him like a thread. Days pass. Then weeks. No reply comes, you ask discreetly, but the servants shake their heads. Some say the letter never left the palace. Others say it was delivered but ignored. You cannot know. The uncertainty gnaws at you more cruelly than rejection would have. Historians write of the rules restricting concubines' contact with family, how letters were screened, censored, often destroyed. Scholars debate whether these women were prisoners or simply protected. You laugh bitterly at such wordplay. Protected? From what, love? Memory, yourself. At night you sit by your window, gazing toward the horizon where your family's village must lie, far beyond the palace walls. You imagine them at supper, steam rising from bowls of rice, voices overlapping, warmth spilling across the table. Do they speak your name? Do they remember your laugh? Or have you become like your erased portrait, nothing but a pale outline in memory? You whisper softly into the dark, as though the night air might carry your voice further than ink could. I am still here. Can you hear me? The only answer is the cry of a night bird, sharp and fleeting. You smile wryly, clutching the wooden bead until it digs into your palm. Well, at least the bird replied. The letter remains unanswered. The silence stretches. And you learn that sometimes absence is not just within palace walls. It is in the very space where home should be. Autumn arrives quietly, slipping into the palace on cool winds and yellow leaves. You notice it first in the garden, the lotus flowers shriveling, the koi pond clouding with drifting petals. The air smells sharper, tinged with wood smoke and damp earth. You wrap your patched robe tighter around your shoulders, though no one offers you a new one for the season. Once the change of season meant renewal. New robes of heavier silk, new perfumes mixed for the colder air, new feasts to welcome the harvest. You remember the emperor walking with you beneath falling leaves, his hand brushing yours as he admired the brilliance of maple trees. That warmth is long gone. Now the season only magnifies your solitude. Winter creeps closer. The nights grow colder. The quilts thinner, the lamps burning shorter. You find yourself huddling near the brazier, which is rarely replenished with enough coal. Your breath fogs in the air as you whisper to yourself. At least the cold keeps the gossip quiet. The joke makes you smile faintly, even as your fingers ache with chill. Historians love to describe the cycles of the court through seasons. Spring festivals, summer hunts, autumn harvests, winter feasts. Scholars debate whether the emperor's affections rose and fell with the turning of the year. But they rarely write about the women left to freeze in forgotten chambers, about how cold settles deeper in the body when no hand reaches out to share it. By spring, plum blossoms return, scattering their fragrance through the air. You lean on the window ledge, breathing deeply. Once the emperor compared you to these blossoms, resilient, blooming in frost. You laugh softly now, still blooming perhaps, just not in his garden. Summer follows with its sweltering heat. The palace fills with fans, chilled drinks, fruits glistening with dew. But your chamber receives little relief. Sweat gathers at your temples, your patched robe clings uncomfortably, and your throat burns with thirst. You press your lips to the rim of a chipped cup, filled with lukewarm water, pretending it is iced wine. The seasons wheel on, and with each turn, you feel yourself fading further from the palace's rhythm. Time moves, festivals bloom and vanish, and yet your life remains in the same dim chamber, marked only by the shifting weather outside your window. You hold the wooden bead in your hand, its surface warmed by your skin no matter the season. A strange comfort. It does not change, does not vanish, does not forget. Unlike blossoms, unlike favor, unlike memory. You whisper to the bead almost tenderly, "You're my eternal season." And for a moment, as cicadas drone in summer dusk, you almost believe it answers back. The palace has always been a nest of superstition, and now, with your shadow lengthening in neglect, whispers of omens cling to you like dust. One morning, a servant drops a tray outside your chamber, porcelain shattering into pale fragments. Instead of apologies, she mutters quickly that it is a sign ill fortune radiating from your walls. She gathers the shards with trembling hands and flees, as though your presence itself might curse her. Later, you catch sight of two concubines whispering behind their sleeves. Their eyes dart toward you before they turn away, their laughter sharp and nervous. You know the stories already, that falling out of favor brings not just loneliness but misfortune, that women like you carry shadows heavy enough to taint others. You want to laugh at the absurdity, but the sting lingers. At night, the lamp sputters low and a moth hurls itself into the flame, wings crackling in an instant. You stare at the ash that remains, wondering if the others will say it too, that death has chosen to hover near your chamber. Once omens worked in your favor, swallows nesting above your window, blossoms blooming out of season, dreams interpreted as promises of longevity. Now every small misstep, every accident, every moth is read as a curse. Historians often record palace superstitions with amusement, writing of divinations, charms, and unlucky days. Scholars argue whether the emperor truly believed or whether ministers used such signs to sway him. But they rarely consider how women bore the weight of those omens, how a broken teacup or a passing illness could mark someone as doomed. You living it, feel the truth. Superstition is simply politics dressed in incense smoke. You light your own stick of incense, watching the smoke curl into strange shapes. For a heartbeat, you imagine it forms the outline of wings like a phoenix rising. Then it breaks apart, scattered by a draught, leaving only the faint smell of sandalwood. You chuckle softly. A phoenix or a warning? Depends who's watching. The wooden bead rests in your palm as you whisper to it, "You're the only omen I trust." Its silence comforts you more than 100 rituals could. That night, you dream of walking through the palace corridors, while lanterns flicker out one by one behind you. When you wake, the room is still dark, the lamp having burned out in truth. You laugh quietly into the shadows. Another sign, perhaps? Or just bad oil? Either way, you breathe, you endure. Let them see curses where they want. You carry no curse but memory, and memory is heavy enough. You wake to the sound of music again, flutes and zithers flowing through the corridors, the kind of melodies reserved for celebrations. Servants rush past your door, their arms full of silks and jewels. You don't need to ask. You already know. Another woman has risen. It happens quickly in the palace, like spring storms that arrive without warning. Yesterday, she was just another face in the hall, bowing politely, her name whispered only in passing. Today she is radiant, her chambers overflowing with gifts, her name sung in every corner. The emperor has smiled upon her, and the palace bends to follow. You catch a glimpse of her later in the courtyard, her robe shimmering like water, her attendants bustling around her like bees to a flower. She laughs freely, unafraid, unscarred yet by the sharp edges of favor. You remember that laugh in your own throat once, when everything seemed possible, when every glance felt like eternity. You turn away before she notices you. Watching her feels like watching your own ghost, bright, hopeful, unaware of the cliff that always waits at the end of the path. Historians will record her name now, adding it to the scrolls, perhaps even painting her portrait. Scholars will debate what gave her the edge: beauty, wit, timing, a clever minister's recommendation. They won't record the silence in your chamber, the way your heart clenches at every new rumor of her triumph. They won't write of the bitterness laced with recognition, knowing the cycle is as old as the palace itself. That night, music pours from her chambers, lively and loud. You sit by your lamp, your meal untouched, your bead warm in your hand. The contrast is almost comical, her banquet against your silence, her rising star against your fading shadow. You chuckle softly, shaking your head. At least I don't have to smile until my cheeks ache. Still, the sound grates as the night stretches on. You hum a counter melody under your breath, low and steady, until it drowns the distant notes. If the palace insists on reminding you of your silence, you will make your own music in defiance. Even if no one else hears, when the revelry fades near dawn, you are still awake, the bead pressed into your palm, your voice hoarse from humming. The new favorite shines brighter than ever, But you remain steady in the dark and you think with a faint smile, let them rise. You already know how quickly the fall comes. The palace grows quieter with each passing night, though perhaps it is not the palace at all. Perhaps it is only you growing softer, slower, gentler. You feel it in the way your steps no longer echo as sharply in the corridors, in the way your breath steadies against the weight of silence. Even the loneliness has dulled, settling over you not like a wound but like a blanket, worn thin and strangely comforting. You sit by the window, watching the moon climb its ancient path. The seasons have circled around you once more, leaves falling and blooming again as if to remind you that the world moves whether or not you are seen. Lanterns flare in the distance, laughter rises, and yet you remain in your chamber, your little lamp flickering faithfully. You do not fight the contrast anymore. You let it wash over you like the tide, steady and inevitable. The bead rests in your hand, polished smooth by months of holding. Its warmth feels like a heartbeat, though you know it is only your own pulse pressed against wood. You smile faintly. Perhaps this is your true legacy. Not jewels, not portraits, not decrees. Just a bead, a robe stitched back together, and the stubborn memory of survival. Historians may never speak your name. Scholars will debate endlessly over who mattered most, which beauty altered the course of power, which favorite stood closest to the emperor. But none of them will know the quiet endurance of a woman who was once adored then forgotten, and yet lived on anyway. None of them will know how you whispered jokes into the dark, laughed at cold tea, stitched flowers with your own blood. The lamp burns lower. You draw your quilt around you, the patched hem brushing your cheek, the familiar roughness grounding you. Your body relaxes into the bed, the fever of bitterness cooling into something softer. You whisper to the shadows, your voice a lullaby to yourself. I am still here. That is enough. Outside, the crickets sing steady as ever. The moonlight spills across your floor, gentle and pale. Your eyes grow heavy, each blink longer than the last, the world softening at the edges. Now dim the lights in your mind. Let the corridors blur. Let the whispers fade. The palace, with all its noise and cruelty, recedes into the distance, leaving only the hush of night and the quiet rhythm of your breath. Drift, slowly, into that place where memory softens and sorrow loosens. Let go of the pearls, the silks, the banquets. Keep only the bead, the thread, the laughter you whispered to no one. Sleep takes you kindly, smoothing every sharp edge into calm. And with the gentlest breath, the story settles into silence. End of script. Sweet dreams.